Welcome to the Psychologym Podcast, a platform where we discuss the mental, physical, and emotional health of your world. Welcome to where mind meets body. With your host, Kristen McAdams.
Welcome back to the Psychologym Podcast, y'all. We are super happy to be back. We have a new studio that we're working out of, and we hope that you really like it. Disclaimer, it's a podcast. It's like social media. Treat it like social media. If you have a mental health problem or a medical problem, go see a professional, for fuck's sake. That being said, this is made just to have a constructive conversation to get you thinking a little bit differently about things, and that is it.
Yep.
Try something on, let it go, come back to it, keep it if you want it. Don't if you don't.
I love that you start off with a disclaimer, like you have to.
You have to,
because people nowadays people go to social media for their news,
for everything, for their mental health advice, for their news. And some of it's good. Don't get me wrong. Like there's some really good creators out there.
Sure.
But then ask your therapist who to follow.
Yeah.
Ask your doctor who to follow. Ask people you trust. Mm-hmm. We all don't trust the same people, so ask your people. I don't know who your people are.
Yeah. That
being said, also, if you're a client of mine and you don't like what you've heard, we can talk about it in session. And if you really don't like what you've heard, I have lots of referrals. I fully support people finding their best therapeutic fit. The mental health field is kind of like the Wild West today. It's a little crazy.
It's a little
crazy.
Yeah, it is a little, because so many different opinions, so many people have so many different things that they like, that they have their own idea of what mental health should be.
It is, yeah. And we keep trying to, and it's funny because as humans, right, we want certainty.
Yeah.
We really want certainty. We want to like label and organize everything into nice, neat little boxes because that makes us feel safer.
Right.
So we label things, we put it in boxes. We try to identify different patterns so that we can predict outcomes. Mm-hmm. We want to try to predict the future because we're scared of it.
Right.
Because it's so unpredictable.
Yes.
I heard Jordan Peterson say that even the unpredictability is unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and that guy's really smart.
He's very smart.
He's
smart. Very, very smart. Mixed opinions on him too. So I'm sure some people would hear me say that and be like, "Oh, we don't like her now because she's a fan of Jordan Peterson." But you know what? That's part of the reason why the first 2 seasons of the show was practice. We started during 2020 during COVID, and it was overwhelming, especially as a new professional, relatively new, like new in the sense of having my own business new.
Sure.
And I was scared a lot of the time to say how I felt or to talk about different opinions or have constructive conversations. And that's a bad place to be in.
It is.
It's a really bad place to not feel like you can have a constructive conversation, to not feel like you can share opinions, because that's how innovation and revolution is made,
right, by
people coming together and having hard conversations, and they, we make them harder than they need to be.
A lot of times people do. Yeah. They really do.
If somebody has an opinion that's different than mine, if you come at me with an opinion that's different than mine, I may feel that nervous system response come up, right? Like I may feel that like, this motherfucker, right? Like that may come up, right? But that's my stuff.
That happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
Somebody starts talking to me.
You're the king of that.
I'm like, oh, it's somebody's talking. This motherfucker.
Yeah. Even wearing this hat, like we're doing video for the first time, right?
Yeah.
That's intimidating. That's overwhelming.
Oh yeah. By the way, hey, welcome people to the video world. Now they get to see.
We made it.
I know, right?
We made it. I can do like things like this.
She is drinking a mocktail. I will say this.
It's a mocktail.
It is a mocktail. But you know what? It is pretty good. We found some.
It's a beautiful cup too.
Yeah, it's a very good cup.
It's a great cup.
What's that? What's the mocktail? It has a spicy basil strawberry juice in it.
Yeah.
Right, and some Sprite.
I don't know. You made it.
Yeah, and some Sprite and some fresh fruit.
Yeah.
That is literally a mocktail.
The mocktail trend is awesome right now.
Yeah.
Huge, I think, in the mental health conversation.
Sure.
There's a big trend towards stepping away from drinking alcohol. Mm-hmm. I like to talk about that there are 4 avatars of people that drink alcohol, the 4 alcohol avatars. This comes from a very long history of working in the addiction field. So this is how I like to explain it to people. There's 4.
Yeah.
Right. So there's users, abusers, refrainers, and abstainers. Mm-hmm. right? So there's abusers, right? Those
Sure.
are the people that are like, we're addicts. It's like John Mulaney. I'm probably going to reference John Mulaney a lot because we watched
fine.
it like last night.
Yeah,
and
it was a great special.
fucking love his new special.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Rehab comedy is like my favorite. And just the way he presents everything is just beautiful. Like just so much humility and humor at the same time. But yeah, so that's abuse, right? It's excessive. It's damaging. It ruins your relationships, your finances, your body, and you have to stop. So you become an abstainer, right? But even for abstainers, you're still focused on not using the substance. So in those two, the substance...
That kind of takes over. Like the whole, like, I'm
Right.
not going to use. I am not going to drink. I am not going to
Right.
get that drug.
Right.
Yes.
You become the anti-hero.
Yeah,
Right?
because it becomes like a personality.
Yeah.
You know? And those are they're
Yeah.
they're like the vegans of the alcoholic community. You know, because they have to tell everybody about it, which that's good. That's what you got to do. But
Yeah, and you have to. We had that experience earlier today. We were sitting at a bar. I'm like, I'm not drinking.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all the
Yeah.
bartenders are throwing free drinks in my way. And I'm like, why today?
Yeah,
Like,
I know. Today of all days, right?
That is the ultimate experience of somebody going from an abuser to an abstainer.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said. There is a lot of good work that has been done through AA. It has a long-standing history. It has saved a lot of lives. And for some people, it hasn't. For some people, it has not worked for them. So there are other ways to approach, this substance epidemic that we have. So, and again, it's changing, right? Because the research is changing, the science is changing.
Right.
And because of that, because we know more now, a lot of people, it's easier for them to put it down. Right. So that brings me to the other two avatars.
Sure.
So those are refrainers and just users.
Right.
Right. Abuse, bad.
Yes.
Abstain, can't.
Yes.
Refrain, sometimes I do it.
And that's just basically like holding off.
Yeah,
right?
like
That's
you do it on like a vacation or a
Sure.
birthday or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You're refraining from it. And then there's just your average user, right? And that's like the socialized like norm, right? That's
I'm having a couple drinks after work, you know?
yeah,
with
it's the rosé
guys.
all day
Yeah.
and mommy needs wine and all
Okay.
that crap, right? Like
The obnoxious end of it.
it teeters on abuse, it teeters on abuse and it's like,
Well, mommy needs wine is definitely abuse.
right.
Listen, child, I have to put you to bed, and mommy needs a drink.
Yeah, and it's funny, and this is what happens socially, right? Is like we make these cute comments. You see it all over social media. We deflect with humor.
Sure.
And the humor that we deflect with has gotten so like global and so widespread because of social media. Like,
Right.
how many comedy accounts do you follow? It's just people making jokes on memes, right?
Yeah,
like
it's a lot.
and it's hilarious, and it does like normalize the thing. Whatever the thing is that they're talking about.
Sure.
But the problem is that when we normalize it, we still normalize it, right?
Right.
So like, oh, mommy needs wine, ha ha, while mommy's drinking wine,
Right.
and making her life unmanageable,
Yeah.
and then blaming the baby or blaming her husband or blaming whatever for it being unmanageable, or stay-at-home dads, the same thing, like, or whatever. It doesn't have to be that scenario. Like that's just the most common cliche scenario. But that's part of the problem with mental health in America today, right? Our generation, like my generation of mental health therapists that came up, like, I started 20 years ago. I took my first psychology class in high school, and shout out to Miss Coyle, Cardinal Goods High School. I love that man. I don't know if he's still out there, but thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see him at the
I was
reunion
gonna say,
this year.
you said you had a high school reunion coming up this year for your high school. So
Yes, 20 years.
Yeah, I
Yep.
know. That's intense.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I really
wanna
hope
see
we
how
pull this
messed up
off, guys.
everybody is.
I really hope we pull it off. I've never been more excited for a high school reunion. I've never been that person. Like, I never understood when they're like, I would never go back to high school. Like, I would totally go back to high school.
Oh, it's
Absolutely
so much
go back to high
easier. Are
school.
you kidding me?
So much easier.
Oh my God.
So much. And I went to two high schools in two different states with two totally set like groups of people, and they
Yeah.
were very different groups of people, but equally as fun. I would go
Sure.
back to either.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd do it again. But I started psychology in high school, and the field it's changed so rapidly because our generation pushed for that. We were the ones that like pushed for the cry closets. I'm sorry about that. I feel like we should take that back.
The safe space.
Yeah, like and I get that. Like we've needed that. We've needed to be able to provide the space for people to acknowledge that feelings matter and that these symptoms and the psychology matters. But it's been taken to such a degree now that we've just like normalized the problem. And like people will adopt these identities, these pathologies as being their identity, and
Right.
and without really fully knowing or understanding everything that goes on behind the pathology, because there's tons of different lenses with which you could look through the pathology, and the DSM is just part of that. So I got bullied in the comment section
I
couple
remember
months
this.
ago.
I remember this. Yeah.
I was like, I want to see what it's like to like put an opinion on the internet, and
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. It's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good. I got bullied. I got comments like, I can't believe you're a mental health therapist. There's no way you're a mental health therapist. And I was trying to fit like a different perspective. Like somebody put a post up of all the various mental illnesses, and I was trying to add like a different lens to each one, and it didn't go well.
No, of course not. No.
And that was very distressful. I always have this concern of, my priority is to not do harm, but in 2023 in America, like everything is harmful. We consider everything to be harmful.
Right.
And that's a huge problem because we need to be able to gauge really a reasonable level of harm. We can't just, work with our own bar as to what's harmful and what's not.
Right.
And the more people can gauge that, the more like emotionally stable they can feel in their lives, right? Because then they're not looking at everything as a threat. In my practice, I look at everything from a nervous system perspective, right? Your nervous system was created at a time and place where you had absolutely no control over your life.
Sure.
Right. And it's made up of these things. It's made up of your brain and your spinal cord and your nerves and all of these things. It's sort of like Dr. Daniel Amen says, that your body and that structure is sort of like the hardware, like a computer, and all of that energetic exchange, the molecular biology and hormones and synaptic, exchanges and things like that. That's the software or your soul, right? Or your spirit.
Sure.
So when you're thinking about your nervous system, we have that primal part of our brain that got us to respond to threat in a certain way. And we're still working with the same responses that we were born with, that were created during our childhood development, and they may not be correct. And especially now, right? The stress we get is largely around other people's opinions of us.
Sure.
And somebody else's opinion is not going to kill you.
Right.
And they make it seem like it is, right? Like they make it seem like the biggest threat is against your livelihood, right? That's the biggest fear that people have now, is that if somebody doesn't like me, I may not make enough money to survive.
Right.
And that is a scary thing, right? That's like our version of like
It's
not being
terrifying.
able to like, catch food and go back to our cave, in caveman terms.
Yeah.
So it's pretty wild that we've gotten to that place. And that's also why we have such a problem with mental health.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about in terms of that. Access to care is increasing, which is good. Like we've always needed more access to care, but now we really need to increase the quality. And a lot of that quality is going to come down to the path to professionalism for practitioners. That's a big mission of mine. It's going to have to do with disseminating information to the public, right? It takes it's still to this day, like when I was coming up, it took like 30 years from the time a research study was started to the time it was adopted into the general public. And that's still true. And that's wild considering the rate at which science and research is churning out evidence these days. But there's a huge gap there between academia and research and knowledge and society.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, mental health therapists, we bridge that gap, right? Like we can be the people that show up and say, hey, like, did you think of it this way? Or maybe it looks like this. But a lot of people, we're taught to live in a lot of fear. And we're taught to, a lot of fear. There's a lot of red tape.
I mean, and that started, it was even before COVID, but even COVID was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, we should do a whole episode just on the cause and effect of COVID.
Yeah, just teaching people to live in fear. That was almost like fear your neighbor. It was intense.
Yeah, and it literally was that, right? Because it was like, you can't go near other people because you're going to get sick and die.
Yeah,
and it started with that, but then it turned into ideology and belief systems and value structures, and
it got politicized.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously it was gonna, right? And that's the thing too, is that we have to share this space. Like we've gotten more and more afraid of each other, so we've gotten more and more distant from each other.
Right.
So we have less and less conversation. So all we're subjected to is the social constructs or factors or environmental elements that are directly related to our individual.
And that's and I mean, you see a lot of things where like people having road rage incidents even more now than they did before. When you travel, seeing I mean, I was just traveling recently to Ohio and like just seeing people in the airport and just how they're like, there's still that. It's like that weird tense feeling of like you don't want to like. Do I get near this person standing in line? Like, you know, like or what? Yeah, I know they don't say we have to wear masks anymore, but like people are still sitting there like, oh my God, if you cough on an airplane, people are going to turn around and be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's
well,
like,
and the
dude,
kids
I was just clearing
too,
my throat.
Like if you went through COVID and you didn't learn anything about your response to distress,
Sure.
like you weren't paying attention. Like that was the ultimate test and like and getting to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Like how do you show up? And most people are like, I thrive in chaos. Or some people are like, I suck at chaos.
And usually the people that say I thrive in chaos they're 9 times out of 10 full of shit. That's what I've come to find out.
They're probably type A. They probably control
Sure.
things well. They probably think very logistically. They also probably have a heightened nervous system like
Just personal
baseline
thing.
to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. Like their upbringing was probably really unpredictable.
Sure.
It was probably chaotic. So chaos feels normal to them. It's when things are calm that feels bad to them.
Right.
And then they hit these self-sabotaging cycles.
But that's not thriving.
No.
Like that's people are like, I thrive in chaos. It's like you're full of shit. You don't thrive in chaos. You can survive chaos.
Yeah, there's a difference between thriving and surviving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thriving, you crave chaos. Nobody craves chaos every day. Nobody wakes up and is like, how can I make my day the worst possible day it can be right off the bat?
Let's fuck this up. Let's fuck it up now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody thrives in chaos. People survive it. There's a difference.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, I tell this to my clients all the time, or just generally, strangers I meet in the street. I'm like, I don't think people want to be happy. I think they want to be calm.
Right.
Right. And that's the realization that I had. And it's so funny because you hear people like, what's your goal? I want to be happy. What does it mean to you to be happy? And they have no idea.
None.
And really what it means is like not having bad feelings, right? Like have more good feelings than bad. Yeah. But that means being calm because when you're calm, your nervous system's at rest. You're in rest and digest. You feel safe in your environment. You can play more. You can enjoy more. You can just be, right? But we don't live in a society that promotes that. We live in the elevated nervous system state society, right?
Yep.
Like the FOMO and the fucking live your best life and the YOLO. And is YOLO still a thing? I don't know. Is it still a thing?
I hate YOLO. So living
like
in
the restaurant, or
I was going to say, well, that was the ongoing joke because we both lived in Fort Lauderdale.
Shout out Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, we both lived in Fort Lauderdale, and I always laughed at YOLO. I'd be like, YOLO, and I'd be like, yeah, that, you know what that means, right? You live on. Oh, you live on Las Olas. No, you're on Las Olas. You know, so yeah, no, YOLO's stupid. It's like it's.
But it started there. You know what I mean?
YOLO
it started
is carpe,
with that.
It's carpe diem for douchebags. That's what YOLO is. You know, like, the hell out of here.
It is. But it's really caused a problem because people say it, right? But they actually believe it. Like, you don't realize half the time that you're internalizing words or phrases or statements or even watching television. There'll be something on a show, right? And you're watching it and you know it's a show and you're entertained by it and there's this like emotional scene or whatever. But you're absorbing that as reality. Right. And you're absorbing those messages. And there's always some sort of subtext or underlying message that's happening that you also don't realize that you're picking up on. Right. And nowadays TV shows show political dichotomies and all these different dichotomies and things that you don't even pick up on if you're not privy to it. Right. You think it's just the characters, and then you're like, no, there's all these underlying dynamics that you're absorbing as reality, and depending on what your lens is, it depends on what you absorb. Right. And then you see all these people, right, and they're upset with their lives. Or they're anxious, and it's because they think they should be somebody they're not, or they think they should be somewhere in their life that they're not. Right. And that's why it comes back to establishing like what is an actual threat, or what are the actual ground rules, because we make up the rules in society, and we need those rules. We need that structure to share the globe, which we clearly don't do effectively, but we need that. Yep. But I think we've taken the rules a little because of that dissonance you're talking about with COVID, because of that separation. Yeah. We got a little out there with the rules in terms of how things need to be.
Oh, majorly. And you still see the effects. It's 2023. You're still seeing it. Yeah. It hasn't gone away. Yeah. You know, it was almost like a reshift of how everybody.
No, it was an evolution. You go through something and you're changed.
Yeah.
That version of you becomes part of your identity forever. Yeah, that's what identity is. It's the culmination of our personality, which is genetics, right? Our genetic makeup, our environment, and our experiences. That's what it is. It's not the shirt you wear.
No.
Like, this doesn't make me a Texan. Like,
no. In fact, people see that and they're like, "Oh, you're definitely not from Texas."
Yeah, they're like, "She's a tourist."
I'm a tourist. I've been here for 8 years, but I'm still a tourist. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially if you wear something like this, and then people like have an opinion about Texas. Now all of a sudden they have an opinion about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, well.
You know, I mean, California is here.
I bought this at the beach.
Yeah, exactly. The beach, the only beach that Texas has, you know, Galveston.
But so, should we go through 3 segments
absolutely.
like we used to?
Why not? Why not?
All right.
Yeah, the hell with it.
Let's head on over to the threshold section, and we'll talk some stats. All right, welcome to the threshold section. I always have this pen in my hand. My clients will know that too. Like in session, like I'm always like, "What do you think about that?" It's
like one of those little laser pointers, but it's not.
It's like my pacifier. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I have to fidget with something.
We got to get you one of those little fidget spinners or something. You know,
I should. Yeah,
just like sit here and like do crazy stuff with the fidget spinner while you're like, you're talking to people, and then people are going to sit there. Half of them are going to be, I'm listening. The other half are going to be like, "Oh, fidget spinner."
Just focus on that. Like it's going to turn into a hypnotic episode. You're going to be absorbing things even more.
Hypnosis via Zoom call.
It's a thing, man. It's a thing. I do rapid resolution therapy, so yeah, we can make that happen if you want. I'll do some neurolinguistic programming, and you'll all be feeling better immediately.
Oh yeah, NLP, man.
And that's the thing, you can feel better. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing about like people identifying with their pathology is that when you identify with your pathology, like nowadays people are so obsessed with like figuring out who they are, and it's such a how-to generation. And I kind of blame like our generation for that, like the millennials, because I think we were a lot of latchkey kids.
Sure.
You know, we were like, a lot of us were on our own. And because of that, we had to like just figure shit out. And because we had to figure shit out, we're like super into research.
There's also 2 generations of millennials too. There's 2 different.
There is, right?
There's like the elder millennials,
yes,
you know.
Shut out.
Yeah. And then there's the newer, the younger millennials, which are almost like completely different. They were raised on cell phones and they were raised on.
Yeah, you guys annoy me.
Well, there you have it.
Unless you're my clients, and then I love you because you guys are great.
Yeah,
no, I do love my clients.
No,
I do.
I know. But no, it's like it's
but
crazy.
Some of the rest of you need to go to therapy.
Well, I mean, it's just crazy that there's like the divide even in just the millennial,
just the generation,
the generation itself.
Yeah,
you know, you never hear about boomers. There's 2 different types of boomers. No, there isn't.
No, there's one.
There's one, and they're all the fucking same.
And we don't know what happened to them.
Yes.
We don't know why they're like this.
Right.
And we don't love that for them.
And then you got the Gen X, and it's like, nope, they're pretty much all the same.
Yeah, Gen X is cool. I like Gen X a lot.
Yeah, Gen X is, that's like I'm on.
I like Gen X. I like Gen Z.
Yeah.
I like Gen Z.
Gen Z,
Sorry.
yeah.
I'm a Gen Z fan.
Can I just say how funny it is that like
we're Gen Y.
Gen Y.
Why? But that's good. It speaks to it, right? Like we're the how-to generation.
Yeah.
Like and we're the generation like technology it expanded the fastest.
Yeah.
Since our, when we were kids moving on. And it's funny because people are like, oh, I remember the 70s or the 80s or whatever. And it's like, no, like we were 90s kids.
Yeah.
90s kids like went through this the acceleration.
We went through grunge, man.
We had Kurt Cobain and we lost him and we're still sad about it, and Tupac was sad about them still.
I know.
Literally. But the expansion of technology in research and innovation was so fast that we couldn't keep up with it because the generations that are younger, even some of the younger millennials had a little bit more access, right? They had cell phones early, and they had we had pagers, we had Tamagotchis, and we had, you know what I mean? Like what
was it?
We still played in the street.
It star 911 for emergency. Or
we would type things into the calculator and
no for the pagers, for the beepers.
Yeah.
Or it's like star 69 for a hookup or something.
Yes. Yes.
I remember
God.
those days.
We still had corded phones. You
We
know what I
did,
mean? Like
yeah.
we had all these things, but we couldn't keep up with the rate of growth in technology. And I heard somebody, you know who he was because I dealt with him this week. I'm not going to mention his name because
That's
he
fine.
fucking drove me nuts. But and it's some people I just don't like.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have no tolerance.
Yeah,
And you don't have to. You don't have to have newsflash. You don't have to have tolerance for everybody.
right.
Like you can let them be who they are, and you don't have to deal with them.
Sure.
But they were talking about like they were boomers, and they were like, "Oh, you think it's hard for you? You should see what it's like for us." And I'm like, "No. You didn't have to grow up from middle school all the way through college while technology was innovating and both need it and require it and not know how to use it."
Exactly.
Like boomers still don't know how to use it. They still like my mom just got an Instagram account.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like
How do I text?
but that's part of it. And so, but I think that's why we're a hard how-to generation. And I think that's why we're very obsessed with like we're very self-sabotaging, and we're very obsessed with confidence and self-esteem, which Jordan Peterson doesn't exist, which I think is very interesting. I'm still wrestling with that. That's another podcast. But it's this like feedback loop, right? It's this feedback loop of like we feel like we can't do it, and we're trying really hard to do it, and every time we try to do it, we fuck it up, and we're out here, we're like the trial and error generation, so we're always looking things up, right? So we're always like trying to put a podcast together, trying to create a career. Like we're a little later in the game at things, we're a little later in the game of having kids, buying houses. Like we've gone through all these weird crises that like mess with our money. Like we had no idea, like we had no financial skills, like all of these things went through. Like you look at Gen Z now, like they're making money. Like they're smart kids. Yeah. Right. And because they get it, because they see it, because they had the technology to see it.
Yeah. And half of them are like TikTok stars making a bunch of money off
TikTok. Yeah. They live in this whole other universe. And I'm sure that happened. Like the older we get, the more we're going to be like, those fucking kids. Like, but we paved the way for that, Yeah. But at the same time, right, because I think because a lot of us were latchkey kids, and we had like 2 parent households that both people were gone, which is why we were latchkey kids. We had to figure stuff out, and we want to get it right. So it's the how-to generation. So we are very concerned with figuring out the answers, fixing things, figuring it out, getting it right, feeling like we don't know what we're doing, which can be good and bad.
Sure.
But it does lend itself to a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, right? Like it lends itself to all these things. And when I first started in the therapy field, again, first of all, the message was, if you get a degree in psychology, you'll do nothing with it. It's a waste of a degree.
Right.
And then the message was like, even if you get an undergraduate, like you're not going to become a therapist. And the therapist ideology was still very much like the old, the 90-year-old woman in her chair with her sweater, or like, the Freudian staunch stoic male therapist.
Sure.
And so our generation really cracked that open and was like, we're going to be who we are. And the how-to generation kind of created
the dude with the leg crossed over and the sweater on.
Yeah, with the suede elbow patches. Like yeah, he's got a pipe.
There, he's got glasses that are kind of down on the.
He
bottom
wants to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, dude. No.
Yeah.
No, that's not what it is anymore.
But it becomes a little bit of a problem because it creates perfectionism. It creates this massive amount of perfectionism, and that perfectionism creates procrastination. Yeah. And it creates lack of action, right? It creates this stuckness in this generation. So they said that we were going to have to increase access, and now they're focused on increasing quality to mental health care. And there's so many different lenses with which to look at mental health, and it frustrates me because it's not getting better. The stats are not getting better. Like you can go to NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. There's tons and tons of stats. It's a super helpful page, but it's kind of like the WebMD for like mental health.
Yeah. So you can go in and try to figure out what symptoms you have.
Yes.
I'm feeling tired. You might be depressed.
In the last 2 months, everybody I know have diagnosed themselves with autism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
everybody I know.
I guess I'm autistic.
There's like literally 15 people I've talked to that have been like, I'm autistic. And I'm like, okay, that must be like, lavenders is the color for spring, and also we're all autistic now. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But we do that, right? Like I've done that in my life.
Sure.
I've diagnosed myself sometimes when I don't like people's behavior in my life. I pathologize them. I'm like, well, you're a narcissist, and you have bipolar. You're like, and it's a defense mechanism. It's become a defense mechanism.
Sure.
But the problem is, the real problem is that I want to get at, especially if we're talking about our research part. We didn't do a whole lot of research for this one today, but
That's fine.
Welcome back.
Hey, first one out the gate.
Is that it's not getting better. So by 2030, depression is supposed to be the leading cause of mortality. And, 1 in 5 Americans suffer with some sort of mental illness. 1 in 20 suffer with a serious mental illness, and about 17% of kids, which I can't imagine that's accurate. Like the 17% is probably a lot higher because of COVID now.
Sure.
The other thing to think about is where people get the stats. So you have to consider the fact that when people are gathering these stats, first of all, your medical information should not be public unless you permit it to be public.
Right.
When you go through insurance to get mental health care, insurance is considered a third-party provider.
Yep.
They are not trained in mental health.
No.
They are just people that work for the insurance company.
Yeah, they sit in a cubicle.
Yeah. So they now have access to your information, and that information they can do whatever they want with. So that's something to keep in mind. It's why I don't take insurance. Insurance also requires that I diagnose with something. And I don't think that's always the best path. I think there's lots of ways to look at different pathologies. And
Isn't that crazy that it's like that though? Like insurance will only pay for something if it's like you're diagnosed with something.
Well, because that has to cover a problem.
Yeah.
You have to have a problem.
Right. But I mean, there could be problems that are not technically a diagnosed issue. Like you could have problem focusing, but not be ADD.
Well, it's sort of like narcissistic personality disorder and in the law, right? There are women that are financially dependent on their spouse, or even men that are financially dependent on their spouse, or whoever the fuck is financially dependent on their spouse.
Sure.
And if you're financially dependent on somebody and they control all your finances and that person's a narcissist, like if there's no legal precedent to identify narcissism as an abusive state there, and that's part of the problem. It's like it's the same thing, right? Like it's part of the problem. It creates these barriers, and it's also a slippery slope. It's also really dangerous because you can diagnose anybody with narcissism if you really wanted to.
100%.
So
we went through that
dangerous.
one night, just sitting there just talking. It's like, this could be considered narcissistic. This could be considered narcissistic. It's
yeah,
like,
well, we diagnose everybody
narcissist.
with narcissism.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like, everybody. Wow, have you ever told a lie? You might be a narcissist. like that's where it's gotten to.
Well, and what's funny about narcissism too is that it's a personality disorder.
Right.
And people are like, well, they say you can't treat a narcissist, and we believe that for a short amount of time. But I think at least me personally, we're going to evolve that.
Sure.
Because, you look at borderline personality disorder, and Marshall Linehan created dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. Right. So there's a whole treatment protocol that's accepted by insurance as an evidence-based practice for the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. So I think we're going to find that narcissism has that too.
Right.
But a lot of this is also part of like this medical structure, right? It's part of this structure that exists around how you identify your pathology and what evidence-based treatments are going to treat that pathology. And it's very medical minded. And our generation of mental health really fought to be on par with the medical field. And I don't know if that was the best way to go, because it is and it isn't. But I think what the future of mental health is going to be is looking at the actual biological bioavailability basis for mental health.
Sure.
Right. Because there's mental health is not just one thing.
Right.
Like if you're diagnosed with something, whether it be a personality disorder or ADHD or autism or any of those things, there's underlying factors that are contributing to the symptomology that you see in that pathology. So because of that, I think mental health, with research, going as fast as it is and innovation going as fast as it is, we're going to see mental health perspectives shift quite rapidly, because you're going to have to take into account all of the things that create mental health as a pathology. So we can talk about that in the road back.
All right.
Okay, welcome to the road back. section.
The road back.
It's my first day. I
Hey,
feel like
it's been a while. You know, you sometimes it's just podcasting, and especially jumping to video now. It's like even just if you haven't been like doing any kind of podcasting, it is a muscle you need to work out. It is something that you have to like kind of you shake the rust off, you know, like it's
well, then you like evolve your way of doing it, you know. Like I was looking back at just my Google Drive from the show, and I was like, holy shit, it's a shit show in here. Like I was like, it's like the Tasmanian devil made this.
Yeah, just going through like the show run sheets and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah,
it's wild. It's funny. I remember Jay Whitecotton being like, you have a whole fucking run sheet. And I was like, I have. He's like, what control freak came up with this? I was like, shit.
Well, to be fair, I mean, like, here's the thing. Like, he's a comic, so in a lot of comics, and I know this because I've done so many comedian podcasts lately. It's not even funny. I like even just ours, like Craig and I running GFY Social Club. Like, we used to have a run sheet too. So I kind of adopted onto you. So when Jay Wycon says that, it's like it's me, motherfucker. I'm the one that. And now she does it. He was
trying to get into my head and fuck with me so he could go toe to toe with me. Fucker, we're going for round 2. We're going for round 2. I love that man.
Oh yeah, I've been seeing him every week, and he's
brilliant.
Super excited to come back on the podcast. But
he's absolutely brilliant. I still think of some of the stuff that we talked about in that episode.
Yeah,
like I think I use it.
It's
regularly.
like he's got so much to say. Yeah, like and not just about and not just comedy either. Like just like life. He's got so much. Like he should be writing a book. You know.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
You know, like
or somebody could just follow him around and write it for him.
Yeah, exactly. You know, hey man, I'm going to follow you
not
with
that
this
he'd
GoPro.
ever allow for that.
He might. Hey, we're going to follow you with this GoPro now that you look like you belong in like you're in a cover band of the Grateful Dead. It's ridiculous.
I love that his look changes. Like we should, Jay, put up a bunch of photos of yourself over the course of time. Do you take selfies? I take too many selfies because I'm a control freak. So I'd like to see your progression.
I still love that he uses for his headshot. He still uses a picture of Michael McDonald.
Yeah, I love that.
That's
no
my
need
headshot.
to change it.
Yeah.
Well, he's welcome back anytime. We're gonna invite him back, and hopefully he will accept our offer. And we're going to have the comedians come back as well. And we're going to continue to do the comedy segment because I just think that comedy is such an important facet of our culture now.
Especially
and
now.
Mental health shows up so specifically in the context of comedy.
Yep.
And we'll have other entertainers on, coaches, mental health therapists, nutritionists, things like that. Just a wide variety of people. I don't want this to be a... we're only going to talk to the experts because that's what happens with podcasts. Like, well, I talked to this doctor and so and so and blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to hear from the general public. Like, I want to hear from the guy on the street. What you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I want to talk to regular everyday people about their regular everyday lives.
Yeah.
Because there's enough resources out there that will tell you everything you need to know about every research study and stat, and every, well-respected professional. And again, we're the how-to generation. So that's what became of that. So I think our goal has actually become to be a little messier here, to not actually be as well put together. I think like my own perfectionism was coming up before, and this idea that it had to be a certain way or look a certain way for it to be done well or done correctly or to be accepted. And I don't think that vibe is really necessary anymore. If you want to perfect it and polish it, whatever it is that you're doing, you can do that too. There's nothing wrong with that. But my whole goal, I think, in life over time has been to show people that they can change, that there's a lot of different ways that you can change, that their road to change is never perfect and it's never clean.
No.
And that, you can follow all the steps in the book and they will help, but you still are human. And you can, you're not better or worse or different. Nobody's better or worse than you, So I think that sometimes a lot of when we polish and perfect things socially, it gives us this sense that we're not good enough, or it gives us this sense that, that's for them and not for me, right? Like learning how to manage your money or working out or feeling good about your life or having healthy relationships, or owning a house, or owning a van and traveling around the country, or whatever it is that you really feel drawn to do in your life, things that would make you feel like you're thriving. You know, I think sometimes the way it's projected in, you know, images in the world is that it's not for you.
Right.
And that's not true, because you're the only one living your life. You're only, as far as we know, you're only living this one for now, as far as we know, until, you know, you cross to the other side and who knows what the fuck's over there. So, if anything, what do you get to lose? You know, I talk about that with suicide a lot, right? Like, people always talk to me about suicide, and when you talk to somebody about suicide, it's like, okay, well, yeah, you could choose. You know, you could choose to complete suicide if you really wanted to, but you don't know everything there is to know.
Right.
You don't know what could change, what couldn't change. Like, there's so much beyond your control that could contribute to your life or not. And there's so many things that you probably haven't tried yet. And if you're going to die anyways, you might as well just try until, you know, you die by accident. Yeah, you know, like, there's no, like, why cut it short? Like, keep trying, you know? I mean, there's nothing really to lose. Realistically, right? You know, like, you could have absolutely nothing and still try. So, or choose to have nothing and be happy with that. I mean, there's a million ways to do life. Yeah, of course. There's so many different ways to do it. Which brings me back to the mental health piece, which is, you know, we like to give some sort of tool, tip, perspective, a way to think about things in the road back part, and I like to talk nowadays about the 4 pillars of mental health. This is how I like to describe mental health to people. And I look at it as there's 4 pillars. And there's probably, like, I imagine so many different variations of this. I was talking to Mike Bledsoe yesterday, and he was talking about some integral theory. He's going to come on and probably talk about it, which would be cool. Sweet. But I was like, oh shit, like, he was talking about integral theory. And I'm like, that sounds a lot like what I talk about. But it's cool that everybody's, like, coming up with their own theories or ideas for this. And they sound very similar. And when you study psychology long enough over time, you find that the same things show up consistently over time and have for centuries. Right. Like, meditation is one, you know, breath work is one, you know, somatic work is one. Like, there's, like, all these things, cognitive, changing your thoughts. So the 4 pillars are the external world, right? So these are your relationships, politics, the environment, things physically around you, outside of you, finances, all of these things. Anything external to you. Then there is the physical health of your brain, right? So this is a lot of what you see in, like, mental health these days, is like SSRIs, and, like, how do we change the chemical structure of your brain so you feel better, which is still kind of like, I mean, it's still kind of the Wild West with that. So the physical health of your brain is also boosted by a lot of things. It's boosted by, like, the food that you eat, right? Whether or not you have a brain injury, if you have multiple concussions, if you have different brain abnormalities, right? Like, the health of your brain goes a really long way. Reading Dr. Daniel Amen's books is a really great way to learn about the health of your brain. The other one is your physical health of your physical body, right? This is the number one thing that people joke about these days. Like, they're like, oh, I'm going to go for my stupid fucking walk for my stupid mental health, right? And they're like, and it doesn't work. And it's like, well, if you have clinical depression, you have major depressive disorder, and they're like, oh, you need to walk more, and all you're doing is walking more and you're not doing anything else, that's not going to be enough. Right. It's still relevant. It's still important, and it'll still shift things a fraction of a percentage. And when you have major depressive disorder, shifting that fraction of the percentage matters a lot. So even if you're walking and you're pissed off about walking, at least you're walking. Sure. And you're challenging yourself, and you're going against the neural network that's keeping you looped into that pit. So take a stupid fucking walk for your stupid mental health. Do it. Take a stupid fucking walk.
Quit complaining.
Just fucking do it. It doesn't matter. You can't ever, like, do that wrong. Right. It's accessible. Yeah. Get outside. Yeah. Sunshine helps. You can't do it wrong. It doesn't matter if you do it for 5 minutes, 25 minutes, 45. Doesn't, just do it. Even if you don't want to, and if you're tired, it'll give you energy. If you're anxious, it'll give you peace of mind. just and you'll surprise yourself because your mind's going to trick you into the homeostasis that you've already created. And if the homeostasis that's been created is major depressive disorder or anxiety or whatever it is, your mind's going to do whatever it can to get you back there.
Sure.
Right. Which brings me to the fourth pillar, which is your mind.
Yeah.
Right. Those are all the things. Well, I guess I didn't really talk enough about the body, but we can do a whole podcast episode.
I mean, you can do a whole podcast on all four of them.
We're going to, we're going to talk a lot about this, like depending on who we have on the show and things like that, because we'll have Caitlin Jordan back. Yeah. Our number one contributor.
Yes.
I miss her so much.
Via Zoom.
I miss Caitlin. Move back. So she'll be back. We'll talk a lot about nutrition, a lot about the body. She's learned a lot. She's gotten a lot of certifications, a lot of education in the last couple of years. She's really challenged herself and changed her life.
That is one of those things where it's like, that is an expert.
She is an expert.
Yes, that is an expert.
Yeah. Yeah. We will have experts on. We will. Yeah. But they're not going to be like, fucking from Cornell.
Yeah.
Maybe they will. I don't know.
Who knows?
See. Who knows?
I mean, we're not going to turn them down, but at the same time, it's like, you got to fit them in. Like, where are we fitting them in?
Yeah, so, I hate that it's become that. You know what I mean? I hate that it's like, well, I have so-and-so on the show, and it's like, that's cool. And like, I want to have the conversations with people like that. I want to have conversations with all kinds of people. But I don't want it to be just that.
Sure.
So the fourth one is actually the mind. So we have the external world, the physical health of your brain, the physical health of your body, and your mind. And your mind is like the thoughts, values, beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. The mind is like when you adopt a social construct or that self-talk, the ego. We'll do a whole episode on that. We'll do one on self-awareness, self-compassion, self-acceptance, self-understanding. And the mind is the thing that's like talking to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's like, this walk's not working.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. Or it's the thing that's telling you you're not enough. It's the thing that's telling you,
stupid fucking walk for my stupid fucking
like health. Like me trying to cook in the kitchen. Like, I can't cook to save my life.
Yes, we know.
I can't. I've tried so hard. Really tried. But I used to beat myself up about it. Like I used to be really, really shitty to myself about it. My family used to be really shitty to me about it. I had a lot of like anxiety and like self-esteem issues, and like I got like very like weird about the kitchen. Right. And now I'll just go in there and do stuff. Like I'll do what I can.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm never going to be a cook. Like I'm never going to be able to.
That's not your lane.
It's just not. Yeah. I just can't do it. That and like I can't build a rocket. Like I'm not Elon Musk, so I don't,
Of course not.
So it's like stuff like that. You're not going to be good at everything, but when you find out what you are good at and you get to roll with that, and you get to really enjoy that, that goes a really long way for thriving in your own life. So those are the four pillars. And those are, if you start thinking about your own mental health, if you've recently been diagnosed with something, if you've recently diagnosed yourself with autism, if you recently, I don't know, decided you like the color lavender, whatever it is, to think about how those four pillars are affected. Right. For autism, for example, is we're learning more and more about it. So there is a wider spectrum now, and we're understanding different variables along that spectrum. Right. There's a lot of research about like different variables that impact autism. Mm-hmm. So that's been really interesting research. So that is actually a really cool topic to discuss in a place where you can see how that shows up in the four pillars. I always stick with the basics on this show, anxiety and depression, things like that. Mm-hmm. Or I'll dive into personality because that's kind of my jam. Mm-hmm. But you can look at each one, and you can maybe start with one. So for example, like a lot of people will start, if they have major depression, they'll start with an SSRI, right? Right. So that will speak to your brain health. But if you're just doing the SSRI part and you're not looking at the other three, right, then you're going to still be impacted by the other three regardless. Right. So you need to attack it from all four of those pillars. And that's not going to happen overnight. Right. You have to do it sort of one at a time. You have to do it in an integrative way. So yeah, I think that we've overcomplicated mental health. There's so many practitioners now because we increased access, and they've all been trained very differently. Mm-hmm. They all have different access to different research. They all have different, their own way or their own approach or their own lens. And that's great because that means that there's availability for also the wide variety of people that exist that need services, right? So you can find your person now. You can find your therapist now. Mm-hmm. But though at the rate at which everything has innovated and expanded and grown, one person cannot learn everything there is to know. Right. Right. So my dream someday is to create some sort of practice that integrates as many different versions of approaches as possible.
Sure.
So that somebody can come in and you can get like maybe a battery of assessments, right? That tells you like what your personality is and what your IQ is and what, your lab work and your nutrition and like all of that in one place so that you can like look at all of it together, because you really need to be able to do that to get a full picture. And I think if people had access to that and were able to do that, and I think they will be able to do that someday, I think that's like kind of the regenerative medicine biohacking type of field. Then we won't have to worry about the fact that they say that depression is going to be the leading cause of death in 2030.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a rapidly changing field, and it's very fun to
insanely rapidly changing. Like,
yeah.
Way quicker than you would expect.
I didn't know it was going to be this wild when I got into it. Like I did imagine myself I was like, oh, I can work for myself and I can have beer on my books and I can sit in my chair and be in charge of my own schedule and help people. And that's usually when, if you ask, they're like, why do you want to be a therapist? People are like, I want to help people. And like, but there's always some other darker reason why you want to, like I became a therapist because I was scared of the world. And I was like, if I can figure out how to read people, I can be safe.
Right.
And now
it's like a defense mechanism.
You live with me and it's a nightmare. Like, stop reading me. I'm like, I don't know how to stop.
I can't stop.
Yep. Yeah. My friends got me a hat that said, keep talking, I'm diagnosing you. And I just wear it everywhere now.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well aware. When you're not wearing your Texas Y'all hat.
Yeah. Or my Slate Mill Wine Company.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
I'm a hat person. Black Rifle Coffee.
That's right.
Love it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm super happy to be back.
Yes, we are back.
I hope to bring you guys lots of interesting content in a different format. Interesting, entertaining. We're going to have lots of fun guests on, lots of topics. Feel free to write in the Psychologym Podcast at Gmail. We'll get our social media back up and running. We're going to be on YouTube, I think. Again, I'm like a kindergartner. I'm like, where's
YouTube,
my cubby?
YouTube, probably Rumble, all the platforms.
Yep, all those things. So we're looking forward to a brand new season and a brand new studio with some brand new topics and some brand new energy. So cheers.
Heck yeah. We'll see you again on the next one.
Be about it. If you're having a mental health emergency, we urge you to dial the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255 or text the crisis text line. Text HOME to 741-741.